Another update on where we're at with Western Australia, and I suppose this video is a little bit more of a taking stock, a little bit of I suppose waking people back up, or a little bit more of where we're actually at and trying to make sense of things for a little bit for people. I do a fair bit of talking to people. I also work for a living, so I do a fair bit of pushing myself and Sam in communicating people, discussing with people, from people asking us to finding where people are sitting, to with political people, with all sorts of stuff, in trying to work the problem is what I'm at. And the problem is is the overreach of government that is in this specific instance of what I've been talking about, is trying to disarm the population, and doing a really good job of it. And I suppose where I'm at with those discussions and in talking to people, that type of thing, there are various thoughts and suggestions and tactics to go forward. One of them is, wake up the Greens voting base to the fact of the devastation that's coming for our native flora and fauna and how bad that is. And they're 4 Greens sitting in that upper house have the power to change that. So there's definitely something I'd like to try and move there. And working out ways to do that, and that whether that's disallowance motions that can be run again, or it's a motion to repeal the act, these sort of things are all in the play of what's potential. But and there's also people that call me up or call us up to make suggestions as to basically to ask about things and to put forward, have you thought about this or that sort of stuff. So suggestions which are about things to talk about rather than things we can do. And I suppose there's also a lot I read social media wise of people going through the process of ultimately what is the distraction. It's an important distraction, but getting onto the portal, getting licensed, because otherwise they're going to lose their firearms. And a lot of people unaware of how much of to the people who are complying and flat out complying, particularly shooting organisations, the sporting shooting organisations that are all about complying, all about getting on there and making it good, and to how much they are, well, to be honest, deluded into what's really going on. There is this, I think, a growing desire to not talk about it anymore, it's just bad, but we've just got to put up with it and get on with it and just carry on because we don't have any choice. And I would say, listen, I agree that it's hard, and I agree I don't want to talk about it anymore either, but that is exactly the tactics that are being used against us. That is precisely what they want us to feel like. So the entities that are pushing forward with this is good, and we'll get to the other side there, and they're good guys there, that sort of stuff. The police are good guys, and we'll get it all here, and we'll work it out and make it better for you, I think are sadly deluded. They are patsies. They're being used to railroad, basically to disarm the population. And I suppose I'll go through a couple of things to make sense of that side of it. By the way, I don't think, apart from the people above the pay grade we even know about, have malicious intent, the people who really want to disarm the population. I think below that are useful idiots in our government that are being used to drive this agenda through the fact they're positioning themselves to a better place, but they're not fully aware of what's going on. And you come down to our police force are just doing their job. It's just following orders is a cry or a statement that's been used in some very bad times in our world, but that's what they're doing. And then the hierarchy of the police that are the ones that are involved in smoothing out, making it nicer, be nicer to people, give them extensions and do these bits and pieces. And our shooting organisations that are doing the same sort of thing. It's all working out. We're giving nice little sweeteners. It's getting better because we're winning deals for you. That sort of stuff there is, I don't think there's malicious intent in those people either. I don't think they're aware. I think they're positioning themselves and their members to be better off in the future is what they think is actually happening. Whereas actually they're being set up. That they're really not smart enough to know they're not smart enough. They don't realise how bad this is. Now I want to go through and explain why I can say such harsh or judgmental things about all those people and shooters that are saying, oh, I'm good now, the cops are being nice to me and it's good and I'm getting there, so it's good. You're being fooled. Let's simply look at what's actually going on. Right from the beginning, Papalia was very honest in saying, get another hobby. We're going to take your guns. That was the plan. That is the plan. That's what he was put onto. I don't believe that's his decision. I believe he was put onto that. I actually don't believe it probably was even from inside our government. I think it might have been from outside our government or people we don't know. Don't know. That all sounds conspiracy theory, but hey, there's a lot going on and I'll get to that later on. But that was more honest. Now we've got to the point of we're being nice and it's all about safety. It's all about this sort of stuff and make it nice. But if you were going to put forward a set of laws that were going to disarm the population or something that the population didn't want to do, you didn't go and ask. They obviously knew it wasn't going to be popular. They didn't ask and say, West Australia, we want to just take all the firearms off the streets or out of people's safes or out of civilians' hands. We want to disarm everyone. They didn't say that. Here's a referendum to do that. No, they went through very, very connivingly with a lot of pushing our legal system and our constitution and things around to create a set of laws with an absurd amount of flexibility to get that across. Very bitter, ugly thing that they went through and then spun it into where this is going to be good for votes because we're saving you from the bad people with guns, but largely just blasted their way through. Didn't let it spoken about in Parliament, really just pushed it through. Then, so okay, that went through the process. There's a lot of recoil, but what can we do? What can we do through this process? Because they'd really taken away the democratic abilities of our state and certainly the rights of our citizens to do this sort of stuff. So what that is going to turn into, tactically, how would you do that? If you just did that, what's going to happen is it's going to end up boiling over. It might take a little while. Populations like ours aren't instantly going to, we're not France, we're not going to go onto the streets and burn the towns down, that sort of stuff. It's going to take a while of building things up to work out how we're going to fight this. Now you'd set up some things in place to try and stop what they could do, which I'll explain quickly. They did. They've set up several things like trying to go through a parliament, trying to put a disallowance on the 73 Act so it couldn't be reinstalled. They tried to do that. They tried to put a cap on the maximum that they could be, that you could claim back from in the way of getting firearms taken from you. They tried to do that as well. These are things that they tried to do. They knew this was going to be a mess. But the bigger part of how you would do this is you would, a few months in, you would work out how to give little things back. You'd work with shooting organisations and sweeten their deal a little bit so that they would be part of doing two things. One, creating division amongst the shooting community, which helps divide and conquer, helps the police force what they're doing, but also you get these people on side to sell what you're doing, both in level. They're selling it to you, and you can also say, as the police minister, that I'm working with these people. You'd do those things and you'd make it seem sweeter. And you'd also, through that process, try and quieten it all down. Do what it is to quieten it down, to stop them rebelling, to stop them doing this so you can get to this place. Now, a lot of people, that is what's happening. Of course, I'm not saying what is happening or saying what you would do. It is exactly what's happening. That's what's actually happening. And we're getting to the point where people say, no, it's good. The police are helping. They've been nice. It's really nice. They're nice people and they're really helping me. So it's good. I'm happy to get to this place. You've just had firearms taken off you. You've just gone and had to go through. There's all bits and pieces. And you're seemingly ignoring the laws that are coming. We have laws that literally say they can remove your right to have a firearm because you have a different opinion to them. They literally are written there, and that's okay, let alone taking property that you purchased and not rewarding you for it, or taking it to start off with. Listen, so many things that are so far out of whack. These things are actually in the laws. But here's the thing. None of them are being prosecuted. None of them are being acted on right at the moment, because that's the other part of the tactic, isn't it? You wouldn't do that until you've got everyone there. Until you've got everyone into that cage, then you start to put the sticks in and start putting them down. Then you start to kill them. That's how you do it. I mean kill, I mean take their licenses away and disarm them properly. So you have to get them all in there. So you go quiet, no prosecutions, no pushing it, no pushing all these horrible overreaching laws in any other level than what it takes to get you licensed, to get you across there. There's a little bit of the fit and proper person when they've gone after criminal records. They've done a little bit of that sort of stuff. Yes, but going with bikie gangs and that sort of stuff, they were already up to that sort of thing. When I say bikie gangs, means that you might have done we've done a meat order for a bikie gang and they've tied that up, and so you've got business dealings with them, so they've taken your firearms and that sort of ridiculous stuff. And yes, it's almost as bad as that. But otherwise, you're not using all these laws. You're not doing traffic stops to pull people up and see if they've got a 22 case that's under a 22 round that's hidden under a seat. They're not doing any of these things. These are all things that they've got the ability to do with 116 Henry VIII clauses. People had enough of hearing that. What does that mean? It means to the discretion of the commissioner. It means the commissioner can decide, I don't like you, you don't have a firearms license anymore. I can change the rules. We've decided that this group can only have 2 firearms per individual because I want to. No parliamentary discretion, no discussion. They can make these decisions. They can change these laws. That's what they've set up. But you're not doing any of this sort of stuff, and you wouldn't do any stuff till you get to the other side of getting everyone in. So after next March, I predict probably 6 months after next March, so whatever the month that is of the year. So the end of next year, we're going to see a savage change in things, because it's not just remove these firearms that people can't get licensed because they've limited, and we're going to lose probably 50 to 60% of the firearms and firearms licenses to get to next March. Part of the strategy, but they want a lot more than that. There are people that are actually saying, oh, maybe they'll be happy when they've taken enough firearms. It's not enough, it's all. Here's another little thing. When I stop and think about it, and I look at some of the bits of the ways that it's happened around the world, and what I think is probably likely to happen sometime after the next incident, and yes, there'll be an incident with a firearm. That's going to happen probably in 12 months' time. Why is that going to happen? Because they need it to happen. It's part of the play. It's part of what's going on. People say, oh, that's just conspiracy theory. There is lots of things you can talk about what's happening, the WASP files, how they're putting out what happened with Port Arthur. There's things that happen with, our police with the Floriat case, where our police just didn't do this and they just made all these mistakes. Like, okay, so they just made all these mistakes in this particular instance that's lined up with an emergency situation that they could push these laws through. It just happened by chance. Okay. Have you seen recently, I'll put a link down below, I don't know if it'll live very long, but a link down below of the federal government, we're taking the chief of the Australian Federal Police to task over the fact that they were caught, and it's all recorded, grooming a 13-year-old autistic boy. Now, I'll put it down below there, but yes, they were grooming them and suggesting and prompting him, grooming him, and down the road of becoming a terrorist. So they were doing that. So I don't need to put into your thoughts into your head those thoughts of what they're actually up to, and it does fit into false flag territory. Yes, it is stuff that does happen all over the world. Let's stop pretending it isn't happening here. So let's come back to where we're talking about. You need one incident. And what I believe is very likely to happen I believe probably in about 12 months' time, there's going to be an incident. And when I think about it, because it's how you take the next step. You've set up all these laws, you can move them around. So how do you take a big step on that side of things? This to me, well, what you would actually do to disarm the population without actually going too far for the public, that side of things. How about a handgun incident that requires something horrible happens with a licensed handgun owner, and okay, he had a brain tumor, he had, or whatever it was, and it happened to this other level where we can go to this sort of process. It's set up a little better. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that the handgun owners cannot keep their handguns in their property and their house at all anymore. And we've got all the people into clubs, or the majority of people into clubs. So okay, the way we'll go forward is that all clubs need to house the handguns in, or maybe all the firearms, but I suspect it'll be handguns on their property. So to have a handgun license, you cannot own it at your house. It needs to be in a safe at the range. So that means the clubs, the clubs are going to have to invest a lot of money. The sporting shooter organisations are going to have to put a lot of money into it, because they're probably going to have to go through $5 or $10 or $20 million club upgrades to have concrete buildings with safes, with constant armed guards, so that then that's how you get to use your firearm. And then they have done everything to save the community that was getting harangued by these firearms, because they put them inside locked buildings where you can only use them when you go to the club. You can't service them, you can't clean them, you probably can't even touch the ammunition to do with them. You have to do it at the club. Your fees are going to go up a long way. The clubs, a lot of them aren't going to be able to go there. But that would be a strategy that would make sense of exactly this gameplay we're on. I feel, and I don't know that's pure imagination, speculation, whatever you want to say to that process, but it would fit the scenario, and it has happened in other places. Well, I shouldn't say I don't know the tactics have happened. What I do know is there are other places. I see a SSAA range in Sydney that has all the safes in that building. So in a city range, I presume, but that is something that I've seen. It certainly put the thought into my head as to, wait a minute, that would be something that makes sense. And how would you do that? Where you would suck in the organisations to say, we're going to look after you, and then you turn it around on them and say, okay, this is what you have to do to keep your handguns. So is that going to happen? What I would say, that the simple step back and have a look at things. There is a strategy in play. It went through a process. We've been talking about this on the channel for over 2.5 years as to what was coming. Started with just some caliber bans. Oh, it didn't affect me. They're going to come for everything else. Oh yeah, but it doesn't really affect me. Going to come for something else. We're now going through a process where at least 50% of the firearms are being removed. I don't know what percentage actually it ends up with, but that's the strategy, where there isn't going to be the property letters. We're pushing property owners. We're taking firearms away left, right and centre. We've limited that sort of stuff, and we've set up 116 clauses where we can change the rules around to suit us. We have an enormous amount of laws which they can action on, and they can start to prosecute once we're all into that. So it is wake up. This is a lot bigger than it seems to be. And I always end, when I go through this process of this thought, is why? We have no statistical reason for that. I'll also attach some paperwork below, which was a police union report talking about firearms. And they statistically go through all, this is 2022, go through statistically all things that are going on. They ultimately come up with, we don't have any issues with firearms. So the police themselves, the core of the police themselves, don't have any issues with firearms. There are bits and pieces, but statistically not very relevant. They're not a problem for our society. But regardless, we've disarmed the population. We had to largely break rules or rewrite rules to get these rules through. So what's going on? The why are we disarming the population it's a really big why. And then let's not get into the fact we've got Chinese warships that are doing live fire exercises around us. We've got a Chinese port that is mining port that suspiciously, analysts say, looks just like it's set up for a nuclear submarine port. We have the politicians that are going over to China after they've been, or just before they leave the job. We have a mass immigration process, record numbers, where they are in some senses changing the demographic of Australia. There are so many things going on. I look at it as all things going to be true at once, but it is actually happening. And as for how deep we can get into all this sort of stuff, my main comment is wake up. Start to have this conversation. As to being involved, be more involved. And that doesn't mean there's an organisation to join and just join them, or there's a political party and you can join them, or you can donate $50, or you can donate $1,000. All very good things to do in their own right. But how about start trying to work the problem? How about whether it's running something in the way of a rally, a protest, whether it's working together to get together a group of like-minded people to start to work this problem. Be more than just asking someone else to do this for you. When you go to the why, and why they would do this, there's some massive, massive concerns as to what's just around the corner. And yes, there's people who want to say, oh, you're just wearing your tinfoil hat. It's never going to happen. Really? Seriously? Why? Why are they doing this? We don't have a problem. There isn't a problem. There's a lot of police force that are leaving because they don't like what's going on. There's a lot of our when it comes to the land management and official sides of our government, there's a lot of people that are leaving, the experienced people are leaving because they don't like what's going on. So maybe they know more than us. But if you just follow that why through, you realize this isn't just guys who don't want to lose their firearms that we're talking about. This is about so much more than that. And what I can tell you is if you're waiting for someone else to do this where you can just tag along, well, listen, some people that's good. That's still a good thing to do, but it's not worth that very much because it needs a lot more people part of trying to find a way forward, trying to put up resistance at this stage, or maybe get to beyond that point. Maybe it's time we stood up a lot higher, a lot harder than that. But that's going to take more than people who are just following along. It's going to need some people at the front of the line. So if you're part of that sort of stuff, you're welcome to reach out to my channel and talk to me. I'm not going to run things by myself. That's not how it's going to be. It needs to be people, organizations or groups that are planning on leading the charge a little bit. What we want is a very peaceful way of how to sort this back out and get to the point of where we don't need to ask why we're doing these things. We don't need this cloak and dagger stuff of what's actually going on. We want to talk about fixing our country and making it better. We want to talk about making it more combined, getting it all work together. We want to talk about how we can do this. We're going to talk about how we can work together better as our community of Western Australia and as Australia. So I suppose that's really where I'm at with this sort of stuff. I really would hope to re-energize people into the thought of, I suppose this fight we're in, there's too much of the feeling is there are people that are awake, there are people that are really concerned, but so many are sort of getting to the point of thinking, well, if I've complied, if I've done this side of things, then this will be okay. I can work out how to work this, and I've got the firearms, I can do this, and this is my forward plan. Whereas this is 25% of the fight. Once they've got to this in, then the problems really happen. Then they'll start it. Then they'll start the prosecutions. Then they'll start this process of taking the firearms. And like I said, that's just a hypothesis of how you would take the handguns out of people's houses and put them into areas you can only use them at the club. That doesn't take much of a setup or in that place. And what they've done with these laws is set up the power to be able to do that. No parliamentary oversight involved. They can just do that with the right provocation to make it morally okay for what they want to do. So as to that's going to happen, something's going to happen. They will start the process. They do want to disarm you. That isn't the question. And it isn't the police force themselves that want to do this. They have got the nice face on now to make it easier to go through this process. Later on, they'll just be following orders. The powers that be, wherever they sit, are trying to disarm us. And why are they trying to disarm us? What's actually going on? But it is going on. So wake up your neighbour, have the discussion, work out how to be part of the fix, work out how to be part of the fight back, work out not just because of your firearms, very much because of everything else, very much because of what we would like Western Australia to be. And like I said before, many times, that involves farmers and fishers and four-wheel drivers and nature lovers and bushwalkers and kids and people who want their kids to be raised unindoctrinated and get a better Western Australia or a better Western world. That involves all these things. The firearms are just being vilified for a reason. This is happening for a reason. What it is, I don't know, but it sure as hell bothers me, and it should bother you. Anyway, guys, that's this one for this moment. Thank you very much for checking in. We'll catch you next time.